Hey, what's up? Welcome to our series, The Supernatural Scripture, where we dig into the strange, the supernatural, and the most mysterious parts of the Bible. Buckle up, things are about to get seriously weird. Picture this. It's a warm Saturday afternoon, and you're sitting on the porch with your cousin. The conversation drifts into spirituality, and suddenly they share something unexpected. They tell you they've seen signs that their late friend is now watching over them as a guardian angel. They even mention their hope of becoming someone's guardian angel one day. How do you handle that moment? Do you nod politely? Do you gently explain that the Bible doesn't exactly support that idea? Or do you shrug it off and steer the conversation elsewhere? This scenario brings up a critical question. How do you handle supernaturality? I mean, the supernatural is wildly popular, even in pop culture, and shows up throughout the Bible. But for many of us, supernatural elements can feel too abstract, mysterious, or even unsettling, so we push them aside. But that brings us to our next question. What if we're filtering out an essential aspect of the biblical narrative? Now, growing up, I had my fair share of Sunday school lessons, but whenever we encountered a passage that veered into the strange or supernatural, it was often brushed aside or explained away as metaphorical. Here's another question. Have you ever read a Bible verse that made you pause and think, what is going on here? Maybe you shrugged, chalked it up to biblical times, and flipped to the next chapter. Let's consider an example that might challenge your imagination. If I asked you to picture an angel, what comes to mind? Is it a glowing, gentle figure with a serene smile? That's the image many of us have grown up with. But let's compare that to what the Bible actually says about divine beings. In Ezekiel 1, we see this description. They had a human likeness, but each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings on their 4 sides they had human hands. This description paints a very different picture, one that's complex, awe-inspiring, and, let's be honest, a little intimidating. Why do we filter out stuff like this? One theory is that we bring our own expectations and assumptions to the Bible. We prefer stories that fit perfectly into our comfort zones, but when we filter out the supernatural, we risk missing a significant part of what the Bible is trying to teach us. The Bible was written in a world where the supernatural was not just accepted, but expected. To the ancient Israelites, divine beings, angelic interventions, and spiritual warfare were a part of daily life. For instance, take Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. This isn't just a footnote, folks. It's a passage that sets the stage for why the world descended into chaos before the flood. Yet many readers skip past it, thinking it's too strange or downright unpleasant. But to understand the Bible, we need to recognize that the ancient audience wouldn't have found this passage odd. They would have seen it as part of the fabric of their reality. So why does this matter? Because if we filter out the supernatural, we miss the context that is crucial for understanding the Bible's message. Take Psalm 82:1 as another example. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. Wait, what does that mean? Is the Bible suggesting polytheism? Not at all. The Hebrew word here is Elohim, which can refer to God or spiritual beings, depending on the context. This verse paints a picture of Yahweh as supreme, presiding over a council of spiritual beings. Understanding this helps us see that the Bible is not just a story of human rulers and nations, but a grand narrative involving divine beings. Just like we see with humans, some are loyal to Yahweh and others turn rebellious. This isn't just the Old Testament either. Fast forward to the New Testament, and we find that this theme continues. In Ephesians 6:12, Paul writes, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." This is not metaphorical language. Paul is speaking of an unseen realm that is very real and full of spiritual beings that influence the physical world. The Bible's supernatural worldview wasn't just relevant to the ancient Israelites. It was central to the early Christians' understanding of their faith. This leads us to another important point: the context of divine rebellion. Why do we see so many conflicts between Yahweh and other spiritual beings in the Bible? Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9 give us a clue. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. This passage suggests that after the Tower of Babel, God delegated authority over the nations to members of his divine council. But many of these beings led their nations into rebellion against God, which is why the Old Testament played out the way it did. Now, in modern times, we live in a culture that values the tangible and the explainable. If we can't measure it, see it, or prove it scientifically, we're hesitant to believe it. But archaeological discoveries continue to unearth things that experts can't explain at all. One discovery, the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in the 1940s, have given us new insights. These scrolls contain texts that reference spiritual beings, divine councils, and supernatural battles, affirming that these beliefs were widespread in the ancient world and central to the biblical narrative. We'll talk more about some of these texts later in this series. One of the best ways to understand this need for context comes from biblical scholar Ben Witherington, who said, "Reading any text without context is simply a pretext for whatever you want it to be." If we ignore the supernatural context of the Bible, we risk turning it into something it was never meant to be. The first step to understanding the Bible in its entirety is admitting that we come to it with filters. We pick out what aligns with our existing beliefs and push aside what doesn't. But the Bible isn't just a book of moral lessons or comforting metaphors. It's a revelation of Yahweh's interactions with his creation, interactions that include both the seen and the unseen. It tells the story of God's plan to redeem humanity, a plan that involves spiritual beings who play significant roles, whether as messengers, warriors, or rebellious adversaries. So let's revisit our original question: how do you handle supernaturality? As it pertains to the Bible, we need to confront it, not avoid it. We need to read Scripture with an open mind and be willing to challenge our own assumptions. When we do, we'll see that the Bible is far more than we might have imagined. It's an epic narrative that spans both the physical and spiritual realms, revealing Yahweh as the supreme ruler in a cosmic battle for his creation. Thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed this, be sure to check out my other videos and just remember to keep reading that Bible.